Hey all, and welcome back to Man of Medan, where we're going to be playing through the Curator's cut of the game. This essentially gives you a different view on things, as it were, where once you were playing as one character in the scene, now maybe you're playing as another, and so on, with like maybe new choices and so on to investigate and whatnot. And just a forewarning, we will be discussing spoilers for the entirety of the theatrical cut, so if you haven't watched that yet, go do so now, because I'm not going to hold back from spoilers and discussion thereof. But then again, you can always play the game yourself, but who plays games nowadays? It's all about Let's Plays, and it has been for many years, but probably not for much longer at this rate, looking at YouTube.
Well, why play games for yourself when you can get me to play them for you? But yeah, the way the Curator's Cut works, as Tom said, it's kind of giving a slightly different perspective on each of the scenes in the game. You actually got this as a pre-order bonus when the game first came out. And I believe as of now, at the time of recording, it's still like that, but from the mixed messages I've got from several articles around looking up earlier, it seems like it'll be toward the end of November that it becomes available for everyone.
Okay.
So I will say I'm not necessarily a fan of that practice. I know why they try to lock certain things behind pre-orders, but you know, it's one of the things that we've had to come to live with. But yes, right off the bat here, you'll see exactly how the Curator's Cut works in that instead of controlling Joe in this scene, we're going to be controlling the amazingly hideous Charlie.
Hey, he was modelled like that. He didn't ask to look like the unripened side of a potato or something.
Well, I mean, it's not his fault that his hair looks like it's overly shiny, like it's like a single plastic texture they've put on it. Oh my god,
I didn't notice that before.
Like, it just looks so off. That's the first thing that stood out to me when I first loaded up the game.
Oh,
yeah,
Lord.
You know what that plastic hair and that sort of facial structure reminds me of? And the arminess. Action Man.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Lord have mercy. So, Flame, what was it like for you playing through the Curator's Cut for the first time, mate? Or is this your first time?
This was my first time playing through the Curator's Cut. Ultimately, what I was going for is basically just trying and like pick different options and different outcomes to what we saw in the theatrical mode.
Okay.
So, like, there are some sections that will be very similar, but there's others where I've got a character somewhere where they weren't before, and so we see some different things play out. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil too much of the stuff that we've seen, but going through this again does give us the opportunity to see all the many, many, many ways this game foreshadows the twist before Tom and Rich picked up on it.
Well, I think my problem was I was trying not to think of the obvious, and it's weird that I didn't pick up on it, because it's a twist from my favourite Professor Layton game.
Yes.
I won't say which one, just to avoid spoilers for that particular game, but I like how it was handled in that game. This one was okay. I think, like, what would have benefited the game more is if it maybe stayed in this post-war time period, because the game is, like, talking about, oh, like, it may have been something from the war and whatnot, something the Chinese were, like, developing, and so on, if I'm remembering the information correctly. So maybe having that, like, war scare sort of thing, like leading up to and going through the boat instead of flashing forward to modern day, might have been better, but I guess they just didn't want to alienate audiences or something.
Yeah, I suppose having the, like, 20-somethings in the modern day is probably more marketable, but I think that World War II, or this slightly after World War II setting that we got here, the kind of vibes that we get, the atmosphere from this opening chapter and that, I would have liked to see more of that. I feel like a whole narrative-based game in this setting would be really cool, because World War II and just the 40s and 50s in general, we only really see that like in war shooters. I can't think of any games outside of like Call of Duty and Battlefield and games similar to that where we do see like this particular time period. So to have an adventure like narrative game in that era would have been pretty cool, but hey.
I definitely agree with you on that one. I think the key thing with it is that when you have the sort of horror elements in this type of setting, because we're so used to horror in such as the modern day, seeing it sort of put in in an earlier time frame, immediately you're already slightly off kilter because you're just like, this is a time I don't fully recognise. And so throwing in then the extra horror elements, you're further kind of put off balance, and so it's a lot easier to scare you, but also it's just much more effective because everything sort of seems a little bit strange. Whereas when you're dealing with modern day 20-somethings, we've seen it that many times that it isn't as scary anymore.
Well, I mean, you could have had, like, great action sequences, like the Medan shooting down the aircraft that Alex and Julia go and, like, scavenge and whatnot, because that was a thing that happened. And
Yeah.
Just going back to what you said, Flame, about the whole 40s and 50s action game thing, did you forget the best one, LA Noire?
I haven't actually played that, so that didn't come to my mind. But I have heard good things.
I know a playthrough as 3 are doing next year.
Oh great, thanks.
We'll see. Even in the alternate timeline, they're still pissed off their tits.
Well, 50 cents, to be fair, was at least $1 billion back in those days.
I don't think that's quite how inflation works, but yeah, it was quite a fair bit to just borrow from you, mate.
To be fair, just addressing certain comments on what I've read, I guess military types do goof off and so on, but as you've seen, that they kept a sharp ship running here, and even sharper fists, as it were, getting that fucking brig.
Yeah, it's like, just separate them. They can't, like, drunkenly brawl if they're a few rooms away from each other. At least in theory, anyway.
And off they go, a ship safer than the veritable Titanic of yore.
Oh, the irony.
Also, how the fuck was this thing still floating 70 years later?
Magic.
It didn't seem to have any holes in the bottom.
That is true.
Should be fine.
That was a zombie ghost pirate Nazi aerial dragon XYZ lightning bolt that hit the ship.
Oh fuck, it's been nearly a week. I was hoping you'd have forgotten that by now.
Look, there's the ghostly poo gas. Why didn't I fucking notice it before?
Yeah, just this mysterious substance just completely filling the entire room here. Nothing to see here, folks.
Yeah, so the Manchurian gold is what drove everyone doolally and whatnot. I have no idea what was up with that two-headed skeleton thing. Maybe it was just people stuffed together into one coffin, maybe?
That's a possibility, yeah. It could have been like a bit of a red herring to throw you off when you're trying to figure out what the shit going down was.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I remember thinking when I saw that was it was like a mother and child, but clearly, obviously, it was two-headed, so that was clearly wrong. But like, I think that sort of stuff would have made, like, I do feel that going for the it was all hallucinated was a little bit of a sort of cheap out, like...
Yeah, because, like, Alex, etc., have no personal connection to this Manchurian gold shit.
Yeah.
For the most part. Like, they're sort of interested, like, what was her name? Fliss? I almost got there.
That's a memorable character this game has, clearly.
With the Frizz? No way. But she knows about it. But it's the pirates that really want it, unlike these soldiers who are actively dealing with it because they brought it onto their ship. So that's why I think if the story stayed with these characters and maybe throw in a few more, maybe it could have been a bit more interesting.
Yeah, I think the other thing that would have helped is that obviously, from what I can tell of what these soldiers know, they know that they're transporting something, but they don't know what it is. And so that adds an interesting layer of intrigue because it's just like, who knows what? Because obviously, like, the higher level officers will know what they're transporting and the impact it might have. And that opens up quite a few interesting narrative routes that they could have taken.
Yeah.
That because they sort of separated it, they didn't. And that doesn't help.
Howdy, Charlie.
I feel like if there was some kind of connection between maybe the past characters and the present characters, like maybe if it's a descendant or something, because I seem to recall in one of the conversations that Brad has with Fliss when they're on the Duke of Milan, he mentioned something about he became interested in World War II because like their grandfather was involved or something. Like why don't we see him?
Yeah.
Then there'd be a bit of a connection there, and like maybe the grandfather was involved in transporting this around or something. Then there'd be that bit of a link.
Actually, idea. The whole game is just set on the ship, right? There's no Duke of Milan, there's no Fliss, there's no Alex, etc. But you play as like 5 separate characters, say, maybe 4 if they couldn't afford the budget for it. And each playthrough lasts 30 minutes to an hour, and you just see the POV of each character in each run through. So it's a short game, but it has a lot of replay value for it. And if, like Flame said, you wanted to bring in like the modern day characters, you could have stuff where like you play as the grandpa, then you flash forward and you play as like Brad and so on.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like having it jumping between different characters is a fair way to kind of extend game time a little bit, so I don't mind that, similar to how with Until Dawn is the obligatory comparison, but you know, like how that was like you get to see a little bit of everyone's perspective. I think that works, but you know, I feel like rather than just having this group of characters on the ship back in the day and then this other unrelated group of characters later on, it feels a little bit disconnected. So maybe if there was more of a connection, it would work a lot better.
Well, what I mean is, like, if you were to have those 5 characters and the game is strictly on the ship and it, you know, is a bad end, like, the goal would just be to figure out the mystery before you died. And I don't know, maybe you could change the ending, maybe you couldn't. It would like have to be pretty hard to justify changing the timeline, as it were.
Yeah, maybe. Like, I feel like this is one of them things where I get exactly what they're going for in the fact that they want it to be the characters who are diving around and they're curious and they find more than they bargained for, and that's a very common media thing. But yeah, like I say, just could have been more connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, that kind of goes for quite a lot of things in general these days. You can see a lot of the ideas that people have in the media that they create, but they don't necessarily always link up as well as they perhaps should do. I'm trying to think of examples right now, and they're not coming to mind. I mean, potentially, so obviously with the Joker film that's come out, I've not watched it, so I can't really comment on it as a thing, but there seems to have been certain ideas gone into the making of it, and they seem to be relatively different ideas to what people have taken from it.
Yeah.
And
gamers rise up.
Yeah. And it's a particularly in that instance, I think that's a very murky ground to walk on. This is much sort of clearer cut. There's not any of that less savoury subject matter in terms of who the main characters are. Should we relate to them? Should we not? This isn't dealing with that, but that's a separate issue.
It should have been a bit rawer considering the time frame. It feels a bit toned down, as it were.
Uh-huh.
And that's the thing, like, I've noticed a lot in... I don't want to say the past few years like it's some sort of trend, but revisionist history, as it were.
Yeah.
Like, characters are less racist, they're less misogynistic, and so on. When, let's face it, times will be times, and so on.
Yeah, and like, at the end of the day, war is hell, and we're not really seeing that. Although, again, on the other side of it, I know there's been a bit of controversy about the Modern Warfare reboot, about how that is a lot more gritty and shows some of the nastier side of the war, and there's been a bit of contention about that.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's dancing on a line between what will be tonally appropriate that people will still want to buy it and play it without getting too uncomfortable, because that is something that people are conscious of these days, while still not being like misrepresenting just how awful the shit going down in this period of time was.
Well, the misrepresenting, I think, was the problem, because from what I heard, they completely misrepresented some aspects of said war and so on, or just made up stuff outright. I know the place they're, like, invading or defending was made up, but there's very clear parallels.
Well, the thing with Modern Warfare is that the controversy seems to be around like the actual dropping nukes and chemicals and stuff like that, which is ethically questionable to say the least. But like the one that I can actually agree with is that they've misattributed a certain historical attack to the Russians when it was actually the US. But you know, you kind of shouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's definitely wrong. I think the part of the problem we sort of have with that is that we are very much in an age which is very culturally sensitive, but also very culturally insensitive. And you've got two very different sides of the debate on it. And there is that sort of, it's a very fine line.
Yeah, let's leave it there, shall we? We don't want to open up too big of a can of worms now.
I mean, I would personally love to, because it'd be fun, but we do have another game to talk about right now. So this is how it's playing out differently, because if you remember, when we were playing as Joe in the theatrical cut, we saw what we now know is a hallucination of the little boy running and hiding in this odd locker that's in the middle of the room, whereas now Charlie here is seeing something entirely different.
It's a bit of a weak stab. You could have put more gusto into it. Oh no, it's a Sekiro.
Also, can I just say, that is awesome. Why couldn't we see more of him? Because that is an amazing kind of evil creature design.
Because it's not fucking real, Richy, that's why.
Oh, it's so cool.
Why can't everyone trip out in a way that's as cool as Charlie's tripping out?
I know!
Now, truth be told, I have watched another playthrough since we finished the theatrical cut. I didn't watch it during, I made sure to finish the LP first. So I do know a few of the differences that are going to happen. That wasn't one I saw. One I saw was like one of the characters confronting the little kid and shooting them, and obviously nothing happens because it's not real.
Yeah, that can happen. I think there's some others as well, though I can't remember the exact differences on how it plays out. I feel like there's somewhere he gets attacked by something like in his mind, but gets scared to death.
Come on, put a bit more oomph into it, Flame. Describe what you're saying with gusto, please.
Well, I'm trying to recall stuff because I know that the ultimate payoff for all of these is that he gets scared to death. It's just what he sees in the lead up to getting scared to death.
Okay, thank you. There lies the Medan, or docked, I guess, serves. I don't know what the correct term is, but whatever, they're all dead as shit, so we're just gonna flash forward and forget all that now. Uh-oh, here we go with the hardcore remix!
Yeah, I fucking love this. This song, this version of the song that's way better than the other one they have in the game, as we discovered during the credits last time.
Yeah, and I have to say, the name of the band that did the credits version of Oda, Gangsta Grass. Still find that hilarious. It explains the country rap mixture, but also it is terrible and I hate it. And why couldn't they just stuck with this version of the theme? Because this is actually amazing.
I mean, even this is like a bit much. I don't know, but it at least is tonally appropriate, as it were.
I would like to point out the album that Gangsta Grass version's from is called Broken Hearts and Stolen Money. So, yeah.
Oh, God, that's like the most country rap name they could have possibly gone for.
I know it's a bit of a meme now, but I'm starting to think that the I like anything but rap and country people might have a point.
Yeah. I'm trying to pick out what's going to appear in Little Hope. Like, that seems like something because it's a wooded area.
Anything I think with the trees and that's got to be Little Hope-esque. Maybe with the hangman knots as well.
Yeah, now one of the things that I've actually sort of spotted in doing a little bit of research is that, so I think it has been confirmed that the Curator here will appear in every single game of the Dark Pictures Anthology.
Cool.
And there potentially is the implication that, so obviously in the intro sequence here, he uses a compass to find the entrance to his office, which obviously hints at the nautical setting. So theoretically, in the next game, he might use a different method of finding the entrance to his office. We'll see whether that actually kind of plays out. But there's also this whole thing of apparently in this game there are multiple references to the Salem witch trials.
Ooh, nice.
Which, actually looking at what we saw of Little Hope, might have some relevance. So that might actually link, potentially in the Little Hope game, there might be references to a certain thing which will give a hint as to what the game after that's going to be.
Sweet, sweet. So, yep, he's describing the Curator's Cut here. It's basically a final mix version, as it were. So we are going to see things from a different perspective now. Who will die? Who will live? Is it even going to be the same story? Well, yes, they couldn't change it that much. It is basically a budget horror game, as it were. Perhaps take a few risks this time. Flame and raise a little hell, as it were. So, we'll see you next time for the continuation of the Curator's Cut. Bye-bye.